The heroes arrive in the inn. It's a small inn in a small town. It's been a long day. The heroes need food and rest. The villagers in the inn take little notice of the heroes. They don't much like adventurers. Adventurers bring trouble. The heroes notice in the corner of the inn are 4 unsavory gentlemen, obviously not local townsfolk. They wear leather armor. They have weapons. Bandits? Bounty hunters? The leader of the party, a cleric, approaches the innkeep standing behind the bar. He's a typical Barlaman Butterbur type of character. He's fat, he's balding on top, and if things were different, he'd probably be jolly. But he is not jolly. He's terrified. What is he afraid of? Perhaps the men in the corner? The cleric asks how much for a room, and the innkeep says, without making eye contact, "We have no rooms. No rooms. You can have food. Food. Just please don't kill anyone." This is a very strange thing for the innkeep to say. The cleric inquires again, "Are you sure you have no rooms? That seems unusual." The innkeep, once again trying to avoid eye contact, cowers and says, No rooms. You can have anything you want to eat, drink. It's on the house. Just please don't get in a fight. Please don't kill anyone." This is unusual behavior. The serving lad approaches the rest of the heroes at their table and asks what they want to eat. Among the heroes is a dragonborn paladin. Because there's a price on her head, because the overlord is willing to give a lot of money, and more than money, to anyone who knows the whereabouts of Good King Omen's dragon phalanx, she goes hooded. Travelers wishing to disguise their identity are not unusual, but it is difficult for a dragonborn paladin, 6.5 feet tall in gleaming plate and with a great broadsword at her side, to go completely unnoticed. And of course, as soon as she speaks, everyone in the inn knows who she is. Ale, mutton, and a place to sleep. Many of the villagers in the inn turn their eyes to the bounty hunters in the corner. They whisper among themselves. Then, without paying, without finishing their food, they get up and try to leave. One of the villagers interposes his body between them and the exit, and several other villagers get up to do the same. "Where do you think you're going?" he asks, confronting the bounty hunters. To the villagers in this inn, to many of the people in this area, Good King Omen's dragon knights represent an older age, a better age, an age of justice. So these men and women are willing to sacrifice their lives if it means this dragon knight does not get sold out to the overlord. Of course, the dragonborn paladin knows this and will not let these villagers sacrifice their lives for her. She stands up, her teammates follow, and it's initiative. Of course, they're just bounty hunters. It's a quick battle, the heroes easily win. They're congratulating themselves and consoling the villagers who lost someone in the fight. There are now 4 dead bounty hunters and 1 or 2 dead villagers in the inn, and the innkeep is completely panicking. "I told you not to start a fight! I told you not to kill anyone! Why didn't you listen to me?" The players turn to the innkeep, ready to inquire what on earth he's panicking about, and then the doors open, and they find out. Floating across the floor toward the innkeep as though the act of walking itself is beneath him comes Calor the Vile, scion of Orcus. Tall, in black and red robes, his pale face hidden behind a mask. From underneath his cloak, Calor the Vile reaches out a pale hand, clasped in a fist, and says, "As per our usual arrangement." The innkeep, shaking, terrified, as though his body is not under his own control, reaches out his palm. The scion of Orcus drops 5 pieces of blood-red gold into the innkeep's hand. "You are as good as your word. A pleasure doing business with you again, my friend." He turns his back on the innkeep, and with that, his goblin minions flood into the room, or they might be undead, that's up to you, grabbing the corpses and taking them to the waiting cart outside. What kind of fell bargain is there between Calor the Vile and this innkeep, and how did Calor know the moment there were corpses in the inn? The heroes are now faced with a quandary. This is obviously a bad guy, but also just as obviously a very powerful bad guy, and the heroes are just getting started in their adventuring careers. They may let him go, or they may try to stop him, and if they do, they'll discover that with the flick of a wrist he can decimate the party, leaving them for dead. He doesn't kill them, though. They are beneath his notice, and he wants them to know that. He likes creating fear. That's the introduction to maybe the best bad guy I've run in the past 30 years. I use him every time I start a new campaign. Calor the Vile, scion of Orcus, is the bad guy in the 4th edition adventure Keep on the Shadowfell. But that introduction I just described is something I made up. It's something I do on purpose. It's a trick I learned from my friend Brad, who ran for me back when we were 17 and 18. I look at my campaign as a series of books. Book 1 takes place from between 1st and 3rd level. The first book of the campaign is the story of how these characters go from not knowing each other and being only recently farmers and whatever else their background was, sailors, outlanders, to being heroes. And the big bad guy they have to fight is Calor the Vile. By putting Calor the Vile, a high-level bad guy, in front of the heroes when they're too low level to do anything about it, you create some great tension between the heroes and the villain. They've met the villain, they know he's a bad guy, they've seen him do dastardly stuff. What is he doing with these corpses? And maybe some of the people in the inn were people the heroes knew and liked. Maybe when they fight Calor the Vile, he actually kills one of the heroes and now they want revenge. One of the problems I think we face as Dungeon Masters is not just creating memorable bad guys, but then putting them in front of the players in such a way that the players get to know who they are and maybe even interact with them a little bit, but not just instantly kill them, and that's all our work gone. So by taking a high-level bad guy and putting him in front of the low-level good guys, you create this great tension. The good guys want to do something about it, but they can't really without risking their lives. And even if they risk their lives trying to stop the villain, it's not the end of the world for them. He's not going to kill them. They're beneath his notice. He already got what he came for. Also, the fact that he's collecting corpses is weird and it freaks out the players. What's going on with the red gold? What is the bargain between Calor and the innkeep? In fact, in one adventure, the heroes actually accepted gold from Calor himself, and now every time people died near him, Calor the Vile showed up. They eventually ended up having to bury the gold because they didn't want the bad guy tracking them everywhere they went. So, of course, behind the scenes, Calor the Vile runs around distributing this red gold. It's cursed. Anyone who has it, he knows instantly if there's a murder nearby, if there's a death nearby, and he can teleport himself there instantaneously. That is creepy, and it makes him a good bad guy. I got the idea of the cursed red gold from The Belgariad by David Eddings, which, if you haven't read, you're missing out. It is kind of obvious in a very 1980s way. It's not grim fantasy the way we have now. But most of my friends that I play with these days have not read The Belgariad, and so they don't know about the cursed Murgo gold. I think as writers and artists, we're only as good as the obscurity of the references we steal from. Steal from stuff that's too obvious and everyone knows and thinks you're derivative. Steal from stuff no one's ever heard of and you're a genius. So I stole the red gold from the Belgariad, and I stole the plotline of the necromancer buying bodies from the Black Company. The Black Company books are fantastic. If you haven't read them, I recommend them, obviously. I guess I'm recommending everything I reference. Now, of course, I've got other content for the players to deal with so they don't immediately go after Calor the Vile. As the players go on these adventures on the journey from 1st to 3rd level, they will learn about something called the Black Tower out in the middle of the forest, and they will slowly discover it is Calor the Vile's stronghold. And it's growing. It is literally getting taller over time because it's growing on the bodies he's been feeding it. That is messed up, and it makes him a great bad guy. Why does it make him a great bad guy? Because he has a memorable plot line. What's he trying to do? He's trying to summon Orcus. Now, it's unlikely that someone the players are going to encounter at 3rd or 4th level could actually summon Orcus, but Calor the Vile doesn't know that, and Orcus is probably going to reward him. In fact, the last time I used him, I decided that if his plan went off without a hitch, if the players didn't stop him, that he would summon Lord Soth, the Death Knight. A Death Knight is bad news, and it's a good enough reward from Orcus for the players to be freaked out by. That's something I like. It's something I recommend doing. Put your high-level bad guys in front of the players so they can interact with them when the players are still low-level and can't do anything about it. Of course, the players are going to want to attack him. I have no problem with that. Let them attack him, but then have him just kind of, take care of these heroes and leave them unconscious and licking their wounds and then leave. When the bad guy does that, it really insults the player characters. It makes them feel like they don't matter. And heroes don't like feeling like they don't matter. One of the first things I think of whenever I'm creating a bad guy, and in fact, if I'm reading an adventure that I bought and I find the bad guy, the thing I want to know is, what does the antagonist want? What is his goal? What is he trying to do? Now, in my D&D games, I am perfectly happy with a bad guy who is trying to summon Orcus or summon Tiamat. That is clearly a bad thing to do. The players are going to understand what the bad guy is doing. They're going to understand what he expects to happen. It could also be something where the bad guy is trying to free some ancient evil that's been locked underground for a long time. That's basically the same as trying to summon somebody. Why would a bad guy want to do that? Because they will be rewarded. It's the promise of a reward that motivates the evil character. I believe in black and white bad guys. I think you can make villains that are morally ambiguous, but I like it when the players feel good about beating the bad guy. You could decide that the only reason the goblins are attacking the village is because the village has been killing off the goblin scouts, or the villagers did something awful like kill a bunch of goblin babies or something like that, so that when the heroes finally achieve victory over the goblins, they discover that it was really the humans who started all this in the first place. Finding out that the people you thought were the good guys are actually the bad guys can be fun and interesting, and I've done that before. I just want to make sure that when the heroes defeat the bad guys, they feel like they achieved something. I don't like pulling the rug out from under them. Now, if the players get up to something that is morally questionable on their own, I have no problem with them discovering that they were actually the bad guys, or they were working for the bad guys, or they were doing the wrong thing the entire time. But when it comes to the plot lines that I set up, I like making sure that when the heroes beat the bad guys, they feel good about it. They feel unambiguously good about it. Sometimes bad guys want to take over the world or take over the local area. Why do they want to do that? I'm perfectly content with the idea of a bad guy who is following the footsteps of some earlier, more ambitious, tyrannical leader. Alexander the Great was trying to conquer the world because other people had done it before him, and it was the standard against which certain leaders set themselves. One of the guys that Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, had defeated, had put up a big stone plaque saying, listen, everyone who comes after me, this is the standard. I conquered this part of the world. If you want to consider yourselves great, you need to do more. That's a real thing from history where great leaders who conquered big parts of the world knew other people were going to come after them and try to beat their record. And they were right, people did do that. So I like the idea that the Invincible Overlord is trying to replicate the success of the Calene Empire and conquer the world the way they did, because he was raised to be great, and that's what great men do. I think a lot of great bad guys are exiles from their own evil ecology, like they were on the losing side of some struggle, and now they've shown up in the PC's part of the world. I think you get a lot of great Underdark bad guys this way. There was some struggle in the Underdark, and the more powerful bad guy won, and the second most powerful bad guy is now exiled to the world above, and up here, he's incredibly powerful. Down below, he was only second place, but up here, he's first place. So now the bad guy's trying to recreate the domain they would have had in the world below. Some bad guys want revenge against somebody that wronged them. I think you can do that. I think that can be super cool, but I would just be careful, as I said earlier, that the heroes don't find out that this bad guy wasn't really bad. He was just obsessed with someone else who wronged him, and that person's really the bad guy. Because then again, they're not going to feel good about having defeated the bad guy, and I think that that's one of the things that makes D&D fun. But, know your players. Maybe your players really like that kind of dramatic reveal. Maybe the bad guy wants immortality, and this artifact that he's questing after is going to help him get it. And he's sending his minions out into the world to collect the pieces of this thing, whatever it is. It's up to you. Knowing what the bad guy wants, knowing what the bad guy's motivation is a huge aid for you as a DM. Once you know what the bad guy wants, it's time to start thinking about what he's going to do to try to get it. I think those are the two critical ingredients in setting up a good bad guy. Knowing what the bad guy wants, and then how is he going to get it. When you know the bad guy's motivation and then you know his plan, it becomes very easy for you as a DM to figure out what to do when the players start interfering with it. The heroes are beneath Calor the Vile's notice until they go around starting to collect all the red gold and bury it under the ground so that he's starved of bodies. What's he going to do? He's going to try and stop the heroes, and he's going to try and get more bodies. Maybe he sends his lieutenant to try to stop the heroes. Now he needs a lieutenant. See, we knew what Calor the Vile wanted. We knew how he was going to go about getting it. And once the heroes started to interfere, we figured out what he was going to do next, and it was dramatic. He's going to send his lieutenant to try to stop the heroes. Another way to give the heroes a taste of who the bad guy is so that they see that he or she is evil and they want to stop him is the hologram technique. This is something my friend Ray used in his game. It was super obvious, although I had never thought of it and I'd never seen anybody else do it. But when we tracked the cultists to their lair, we discovered them sort of worshipping and taking orders from this big hologram, a la the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back. That's a very Star Wars thing to do, to have one bad guy talking to another bad guy, and the other bad guy is a hologram, which means the heroes can't reach out and interfere with them in any way. So we had tracked these cultists back to their lair, and we saw them genuflecting to this evil necromancer hologram. And he says, "You have failed me for the last time." And then he kills them remotely, turns their bodies to ash, and animates them into shadows. And I was like, wow, that is a great bad guy. I was super jealous I had never thought of that. We, the heroes, could not in any way interfere with or stop this guy because he's there only as a projection, only as an illusion. And we watch as he does something terrible to his own people. That is a great way to set up a bad guy. We couldn't do anything about it, even though we really wanted to. Another technique that I've used before is I'll have someone who survived a battle with the heroes, and I often have my bad guys retreat. In fact, an important bad guy retreated just last Thursday. Stay tuned. Maybe it was a named bad guy who escaped because he had the opportunity, or maybe this was a faceless mook before, and the next time the heroes see him, he's going to have a name and he's going to have a backstory. But by having bad guys retreat so they can come back and fight another day, you have a great opportunity to set up a recurring bad guy. The players remember fighting him before, and when they see him now more powerful, more evil, they think, if only we had stopped that guy, then these people that he's hurting wouldn't be in trouble. That is a great way to expose heroes to bad guys and make them feel responsible for it. Something else I do is I always have several bad guys running around in the world. Some are low level, some are mid level, some are high level, and each one represents things I expect the players to be doing at different stages in the campaign. And maybe because I'm a writer, I will have the heroes, when they defeat the first bad guy, find communications, letters between this first bad guy and all the other bad guys. And now they get to see the bad guys from another point of view, from the other villain's point of view, and they get to find out a little bit about what they want. They get to find out what the bad guys' names are, maybe what their motivation is. You can put all sorts of interesting clues inside a discovered letter, and it's okay if the players are like, what is this guy talking about? In fact, I think they probably should think, what is this guy talking about? Because now they want to know. Why is this guy talking about the Tower of the Oracle? Why is this character talking about the Prophet? It's best, I think, if the bad guys communicate in a way that seems perfectly natural. They expect each other to understand what they're talking about. And that makes it so the heroes don't, and that makes it seem more real, and it gives the players something to wonder about. And then you got them hooked. Also, consider using heroes as villains. I do this all the time. I love doing it. In fact, in one game I ran, we played for about 3 years. Craig was playing a 9th level wizard, and he was the head of one of the 9 orders of magic in the Royal College of Sorcery. He was the head abjurer. He called himself the Alienist. And because it was his job to summon these things from other dimensions that oftentimes would get out of hand, he had a bodyguard. My friend Mark was playing a pure fighter named Storm. And in their backstory, Storm had been Craig's character's bodyguard for a long time. The bad guys in the campaign were kidnapping wizards, so of course the Royal College of Sorcery is interested, and they send Craig to try to stop them. So Craig takes his bodyguard with him. And they adventure for several years in real time in the Underdark, in the Night Below adventure that I've run more than once. One of the other players was playing the regent of his own country. He was the Thief King of Endier. And he had lost his court wizard. That's the reason he was with the party. The high-level wizard in the party was investigating what was happening because he belonged to the Royal College of Sorcery, and the Thief King of Endier was trying to recover his court wizard. After several years of adventuring, they finally encounter the ultimate bad guy, and we see the Thief King of Endier's court wizard there held captive. Him and the other wizards fueling the bad guy's infernal machine. There's a battle, it's initiative, and on Mark's character's turn, he leaps forward and executes the court wizard they had come to rescue. For 3 years, the entire time he had been playing with the party, he was a mole for the Thieves Guild, sent to assassinate the court wizard of Endier. Craig, whose character Mark's character was ostensibly the bodyguard for, was really upset at Mark. Mark's character then had to survive an entire round of combat against the other heroes, which he was able to do because of all the magic items he had accumulated up to that point, and then he pulled out a magic item given to him by the Thieves Guild, he used it, it opened a portal, and he jumped through the portal. Craig's wizard, seeking revenge, followed, leaving the rest of the party to finish the adventure. Every game I've run since then, I've had Craig's character and Mark's character make an appearance as though they're traveling across the multiverse. The betrayed, chasing the betrayer across universes. When Mark's character revealed that he had been a mole the entire time, the entire party was furious and also amazed. It was incredibly memorable. We still talk about it now. It's been like 20 years since we did that. Now, I should point out that was my idea. Mark came to me and said, I want to do something different with my character. I don't want to just be a standard good guy. I want to have some kind of like a cool secret. I had already been talking to my friend Brad about his character, the Thief King of Endier, and his character's motivation, his missing court wizard. So it seemed like a cool idea to me that Mark's character was a mole planted in the Royal College of Sorcery, there to keep tabs on what these guys were doing. In other words, he wasn't an agent provocateur. He was literally just planted in the Thieves Guild to report back with information. But once Craig's wizard was given the task to go into the Underdark and recover these missing wizards, Mark's character was given a new mission. And the entire time, he didn't know what was going to happen. Maybe they would come to the end of the adventure and discovered that the court wizard had been killed. Or maybe the court wizard would die in battle or something else would happen and Mark would just continue being a mole and no one would ever find out. So that was super memorable and something you were free to steal. I think a lot of these things are not so much technique as just things I've tried that worked that I hope you steal. I think that's maybe the most efficient way to transmit information from DM to DM is not really giving advice on technique, but rather here are things I did that worked, you can use them. For instance, I often have bad guys resurrect dead good guys. They hate that. There's a great adventure called The Red Hand of Doom that we'll talk about in another episode, in which at one point the heroes have to blow up this bridge to stop the evil army from crossing it. It's a very Force 10 from Navarone, the Dirty Dozen style of thing, and the heroes were in the middle of getting ready to blow the bridge when the army started marching across it, and my friend Craig, playing the monk Domnall, decided that he was going to stand on the bridge and stop the bad guys, buying time for the good guys. You can tell Craig and I have known each other a long time because his characters often feature in my nefarious plots. It worked, the bridge blew up, the bad guys' army was defeated, but Craig's character Domnall died in the process. I then wrote a scene and emailed it to my friends in which the bad guy and his lieutenant are picking over the rubble of the bridge. I'll link to the story in the doobly-doo. I think I still have it, even though we did this back in like 2002 or 2003. The bad guy resurrects Domnall's character as a vampire. Now the bad guys have a new ally. Craig's character is now an evil NPC that I run, and I like the idea that now the bad guys know a lot about the good guys because they can just ask Domnall. Then when the players fought this awesome half-vampire monk, they were fighting Craig's old character and they were like, wow, we hate this. It was super memorable once again. I used that same technique again the last time I ran Calor the Vile. I had to kind of invent some new abilities for him on the spot because the hero's plan was so good that if I didn't, the entire battle would have lasted about 1 round. I gave Calor the Vile, Scion of Orcus, the ability to cast a spell on an unconscious body. That character's player then has to make a saving throw, and if they fail, they come back as an undead. I first used it on an NPC ally of the heroes who went unconscious. That character made her saving throw, so she didn't die, but the heroes knew, whoa, this guy can do something to you when you're unconscious. And that kind of foreshadowing makes it so I didn't feel bad using that ability on them later. The players immediately said, make sure no one's ever unconscious. As soon as someone goes unconscious, heal them. Well, that proved to be easier said than done, and when my friend Jess's character, Lady Serial, went unconscious, I had Calor the Vile use his ability on her, and she failed her save. Which meant she was dead, Calor the Vile killed her and brought her back as a vampire. The heroes then defeated Calor the Vile, but because Lady Serial was now a vampire, she was able to turn into a mist and escape. Now I put that campaign on hold while I started running another campaign in the same area with another group of people at Turtle Rock Studios, and one of the bad guys they are dealing with is Lady Serial, the Vampire Queen. They didn't know at first that Lady Serial was the bad guy they were facing until they saw the symbol she burns into the undead she creates. Because that is a symbol that Jess came up with when I asked her, hey, if your character had a bad guy symbol, what would it be on Twitter? And she responded on Twitter, and my friend Phil, who's in the Thursday night game, follows both of us on Twitter, and when he saw me hold up that picture on my phone, he was like, oh my god. That's when he realized Jess was the bad guy they were fighting. And that made it super memorable. I'll often reach out to her on Twitter and say, okay, what would Lady Serial do next? Because she is now running this bad guy. And that is something I learned from my friend Brad. He would often take the bad guys in his campaign and give them to his friends that weren't playing. Usually like his older brother or the guys his older brother played D&D with. And then he would just get together with them. He'd call them on the phone or they'd go out to get something to eat and he would say, okay, here's what's going on in the game. What is your evil character going to do? So from his brother's point of view, for instance, he's basically playing D&D without ever going out on adventures. He's sending his minions to go out on adventures for him. And then Brad is reporting back and saying what happened. That made his bad guys super memorable. Having friends of yours run the bad guys means you don't have to figure out what's this guy going to try and do. You will discover if you pick some of your friends to run the bad guys that they are far more nefarious than you'll ever be because they have nothing else to do except think about this bad guy and his schemes. They will invent amazing ideas, amazing plots and plans that you never would have thought of. Then it's just your responsibility to figure out, okay, what happens? You probably don't have time to get together with that player and play D&D like normal, but remember, he's playing a high level bad guy. Let him do stuff, let him come up with stuff and let it work. I love that kind of high-level political layer on top of the normal adventuring game. So the heroes are like delving in dungeons and killing orcs and stuff like that, but the bad guys are plotting and scheming on a higher political plane. One of the things I think we do as DMs a lot is we don't keep strict track of time. We don't always have a calendar and track days of travel and how long players spend in the dungeon, and usually that's not a big deal. But once you have a player friend of yours running a bad guy, suddenly you kind of need to start keeping track of time. And we'll do a whole other episode on keeping track of time. My friend Jim regularly deploys a recurring villain called Bogan Redcap, and the cool thing about that is Bogan Redcap is the leader of the goblins in whatever campaign you're running, and the heroes will eventually at second or third level defeat him. But what the heroes don't realize is that Bogan Redcap is a title, right? There's a ritual and they take a hat and they dip the hat in the blood of their sacrificed victims, and then whichever goblin is wearing the red hat is Bogan Redcap. Now, sometimes it's frustrating for the heroes to be like, but we killed that guy. Right? The heroes like feeling like they accomplished something. But then they find out, yeah, you did kill that guy, but this is a different Bogan Redcap. There is always a Bogan Redcap. Sometimes Bogan Redcap is a goblin chieftain, but sometimes maybe it's a hobgoblin that's running the goblins. In my campaign, hobgoblins are half human, half goblins. I think that makes them a little bit more interesting than just generic hobgoblins. So that's the villain episode, or maybe the first villain episode. I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about villains, but I didn't want this video to get too long. I've done a lot of long videos recently. We talked about making sure you know what the bad guy wants, and we talked about different things bad guys tend to want, and we talked about thinking about how the bad guy is going to get what he wants. Once you know those two things, you are prepared for whatever the heroes throw at you. We talked about putting the bad guy in front of the heroes in ways that make the heroes hate the bad guy and want to stop him, but don't put the bad guy at risk too early. For instance, the high-level bad guy who floats into the room when the heroes are still first or second level, or the holographic bad guy that does something awful while the heroes watch and they can't stop him, or even intercepting missives, communications between the bad guys so they can read letters from the bad guys' points of view. We talked about recurring villains, letting bad guys escape to fight another day and maybe come back higher level. We talked about having different players be bad guys and have secret motivations and secret agendas. And we talked about recruiting your friends and letting them run the bad guys almost as though the bad guys were just evil PCs. That seems like a lot of content to me and a lot of advice and examples that should tide us over until the next time we need to talk about villains. We hit 10,000 subscribers the other day. I think it took us about 10 weeks. That's insane. It's about 1,000 subscribers a week. I genuinely had no idea we would do this well this quickly. I thought it would take a long time to get to 10,000 viewers. Mostly, I think we're at 10,000 viewers thanks to some of the guys on Critical Role, Matt Mercer and Liam O'Brien. I think another reason we hit 10,000 subscribers is because a lot of my videos get shared on Reddit. Hi, Reddit. It's kind of a weird thing to say hi, Reddit, as though Reddit is a person. I am on Reddit, so in a weird way, that's me saying hi to myself. I've been on Reddit. I consider myself a native Redditor. I have been on Reddit for almost 5 years now, and I love it. I'm on it every day. I'm always surprised when I meet someone who's like, Reddit, whatever with that. I feel like they don't get it. We had some folks on Reddit and in the YouTube comments tell me that I screwed up how my friend Phil's Warlock Graves' abilities work. For instance, some people think that his telepathy shouldn't be two-way, like when he introduced himself to the characters and tried to use his telepathy to communicate with them. Apparently there's somebody who works at Wizards of the Coast who said that when they wrote the Warlock ability, they didn't intend it to be two-way, but as far as I'm concerned, the Warlock ability says this gives you telepathy and then puts some restrictions on the range, but when you go and look up what does telepathy do in either the monster manual or the spell, it explicitly says it's two-way communication. So in my game, a Warlock's telepathy is two-way. That's the kind of ability that's mostly going to be used narratively, I think, so allowing it to be a little bit more useful than the way the designers intended is not that big a deal. People pointed out that Graves' spells don't work the way I thought they did, and he doesn't really have second-level spell slots the way a wizard does, and you know what? That's fine. I trust that Phil is doing it right. That was my screw-up just in the way I described it. I'll tell you that Phil has complained recently that he doesn't feel like his Warlock is that useful or that powerful, and maybe you have some advice for Phil on how to optimize his Warlock. What makes a Warlock useful or powerful? When I said in a comment that I trusted Phil to know the rules, there were some people who were like, wait a minute, it's your job. It's the DM's job to know the rules. To which I strongly object. I don't really think it's possible for any one human being to hold all the rules of D&D in their head without having to look stuff up. And to me, looking stuff up at the table is kind of death. I mean, we do it, but I try to avoid it whenever possible. I try to make a ruling and move on, and we look it up outside the game. I don't like things that slow the game down, and I don't mind making a ruling, and I just tell my players, I don't make a secret about it. I say, look, this is how it's going to work for now, because this is what makes sense to everybody, and we all kind of agree, and then we can look it up later and find out what the real ruling is. And once we know the real rules, we'll do it. Or we'll stop and we'll look something up if this is something that has come up many times, and we just want to resolve it and know for certain how does it work. But generally speaking, I leave it to the players to run their characters, and it's the wizard's job to know how a wizard works, and the warlock's job to know how a warlock works. It's my overall belief that Dungeons & Dragons is not the thing between the covers of the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's the thing that happens at the table. And if knowing the rules of the game is in some way a barrier to you playing, don't worry about it. Just start playing, get behind the screen, start running an adventure. You know, go online, watch a tutorial, read the instructions in the starter set. But once you feel like you have a basic handle on the rules, get started. You know, my friends and I, when we were teenagers and running D&D, we often played the game wrong. We had no idea we were doing it wrong, but we would read the rules or skim them and get a vague idea of how it was supposed to work. And we would only discover years later that we'd been doing a lot of things wrong. And that was a lesson I think many of us learned back in the day, was that you were able to have a lot of fun and play the game for a long time and not really be playing by the rules. Don't mistake my meaning. I do not consider ignorance of the rules a virtue. All things being equal, it is better to know the rules. I'm just trying to give you advice. Do not let knowledge of the rules get in the way of you running a game. Many of us ran the game for years and had fun, and our players had fun, and we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants and sort of making it up as we went. And because we were all having fun, that was okay. People responded to my alignment video by citing Judge Dredd as an example of a lawful neutral character. I think that's a great example. I loved that Judge Dredd movie with Carl Urban. That's basically my only real exposure to the character. I've never really read the 2000 AD comics. That's the reason he didn't come to mind when I was thinking about it. But it is a great reference. People argued that Treebeard and the Ents really aren't neutral because they only attacked Isengard because Saruman was cutting down their trees. They only attacked in self-defense, not out of a desire to do good. And that is a good point. It's one I hadn't really considered when I was thinking about it, and it is an argument for why Treebeard and the Ents would be true neutral. But at the same time, when Treebeard came across Merry and Pippin in the forest, he did not kill them or ignore them, he helped them. He helped innocent people who weren't Ents, who were strangers in his forest when he had no real reason to do so, and that is the action of a good character, I think. Also, some people online were a little confused because I talk about the people I play with indiscriminately, and I have not really explained that I run D&D for several different groups of people. So if you watched the earlier episode, Why Do We Play D&D, where I talked about this epic plot that played out with my friend Robbie's character Gink, just be aware that Robbie belonged to an earlier iteration of D&D at Turtle Rock Studios, a game I ran in 2012. And then I ran another game in 2015 for my friend Lars, who had played in that game, but he was playing a new character. That's where Lady Serial came from. And then once they killed Calor the Vile, I stopped that game and started running a new game for my other friends that is kind of run by my friend Phil. So I've got lots of irons in the fire, and I don't really delineate one group and another in these videos, so it's easy to get confused as to who's in what group. Just think of it in terms of Phil's group and Lars's group. I'm really curious to see how far this channel can go because I had no idea how many subscribers a lot of subscribers was. To me, 10,000 seems insane. But I thought about it, and now that I have 10,000 subscribers, I want to do something and contribute to the D&D community in a way kind of beyond the scope of these videos. Stay tuned. Keep in mind that regardless of how engaging or entertaining some of these stories might be, the reason I'm doing this channel is because I want more people to run Dungeons & Dragons. So I have an idea as to how to make that a little bit easier for people, and it is predicated on my conviction that it's easier to take pre-existing content and reskin it for yourself rather than create everything from scratch. I mean, when you think about it, the game's been around for 40 years, which means there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of official adventures published by TSR. They used to have a magazine they did every month called Dungeon Magazine that had 4 or 5 adventures in it, and that magazine ran for like 30 years, so that by itself is a ton of adventures, plus all the official adventures they published, plus the open gaming license they released in the year 2000, which allowed all these other companies to make adventures for them that were all professionally written and edited. And then think about all the stuff that's happened with 5th edition and the DM's Guild, right? There is a ton of content out there for you to reskin. The only question is how to find it. So that's something we're going to talk about hopefully this week. I believe the next video is going to be a campaign recap where we talk about what happened to Graves and the party in Broken Spire Keep. And the video after that is going to be me using my powers for good instead of evil and trying to help DMs find the content that will help them run a game. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you get a notification whenever I upload a new video. And as usual, I have no ads. I do not have a Patreon. If you want to help support the channel, come by my Amazon page in the doobly-doo. I am an independent fantasy author. I have 2 novels out. I'm working on my 3rd. And if you like D&D, if you like fantasy, I think you'll probably like them. I mean, you might like them. Read the reviews, decide for yourself. It's $4 a book, of which I see $3, which means if you buy both books, you just threw me $6. Next episode, we find out what happened to Graves and the party in Broken Spire Keep. It was pretty epic, let me tell you. The half-orc fighter Nicodemus has become more attuned to the Shield of Andrim, which means he's unlocked one of its powers. That helped him out a little bit in the fight. And then the episode after that, which hopefully will be this week, I hope we do another week where we have 3 videos go up. We're going to talk about trying to find a way for DMs to find the content they're looking for. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you wanted to have an adventure in a wizard's tower for your 5th level characters where the bad guy was a necromancer, that you could just look that up online? Or if you wanted to find an adventure that featured beholders, or an adventure that took place on one of the planes of the abyss. I mean, those adventures are out there. All we gotta do is come up with an easy way for you to find them. Until next time, peace out.